It's time for the Volquest Mailbag podcast, answering your questions from the General's quarters every week, right here on Volquest. Good Thursday, everybody, and welcome into the Volquest Mailbag podcast with Rob Lewis, Austin Price, Brent Hubbs. I'm Eric Kane. It's the Smoky Mountain Organics Mailbag podcast. 3 locations right here in East Tennessee, including one in Knoxville, 8018 Kingston Pike, across the street from the Trader Joe's. And, of course, you can buy online at the website at SmokyMountainOrganics.com. Subscribe and follow Volquest on YouTube. When we post something there, you will be notified, and that's the place to go to for all that information. All right, got a full bank of questions. We'll start with all ball recruiting. What's up with JP Estrella? Any other big men in the 2023 class that Tennessee has a good shot with? Any running backs the staff is keeping an eye on this fall past Robinson, Austin Price?
As far as running backs, we'll see what happens with Roderick Robinson. What will Tennessee do there? I'm not closing the door totally on Deshaun Bishop. Could Tennessee potentially come back around there in the fall? We'll see. Again, a lot of it depends on where they're at and what they do. I said on the board on Tuesday, I fully expect Tennessee to add to this current roster with a grad transfer tailback. Marquise Stepp is the name, from Nebraska. Kid originally signed with Southern Cal a couple of years ago. That's the potential add. And it just boils down to Tennessee can't stay, they're not super deep there. They're fairly thin, especially on experience. And a guy like Laneith Whitehead just simply can't stay healthy.
JP Estrella, I think he really likes Tennessee, but I also think, he's had a fantastic summer. He's gone from a 3-star to, a top 50 player, the span of a few months. And I just think it's going to be tough for Tennessee. He's from Maine, goes to prep school in New Hampshire. Distance is not in their favor, and he's just blown up. I still think he likes Tennessee. I think Tennessee is a factor. They were in early. I think they benefit from the fact that they, were one of the first to really offer him and go hard. But now, when Kansas offers you, when Duke offers you, it changes the game.
We'll go to a couple here from Ath Run. Brent, Tennessee, does it have a realistic chance with Boo Carter? Of course, pretty much every school in the country's, looking at him both offensively and defensively. Tennessee likes him at defensive back, but a realistic chance of Boo Carter?
They got to get him on campus more, I think. And Austin, I'll defer to you here. You know as much as that. It was a big deal to get him here for that last camp that they had, but they've got to get him back because Boo Carter's going to be a guy, in my opinion, Austin, that takes a lot of trips and sees a lot of places. And is Tennessee going to be in his rotation of schools to see, or was that kind of a one-time thing? He says good things about Tennessee, but I think for Tennessee to get deep into that one, you're going to need to see Boo Carter on campus more than just one camp visit and, at the end of the camp season in June. They need to get him back multiple times.
Well, and he's, again, supposed to be coming this weekend. So if he arrives this weekend, that's 2 times in 30 days.
Which is good.
And, which is good. And then you get him back for a big game this fall, Florida game, end of September. I think that's important. In my opinion. But I'm with you. I think the more they get him to campus, the stronger their chances are of landing Boo Carter, go up.
On that note, I know you mentioned some of the war room, but prospects you guys know, any new names or anything committed, uncommitted, who plan to be here on campus this weekend?
I know Jaden Davis is going with his teammates. So like 5 of his teammates are going up to Michigan. So he won't be here. He had told Tennessee he was coming, but then that got shifted around. And then Tennessee will have a bunch of like John Slaughter, Sean Davion Bradley, a bunch of those guys will be here this weekend. So, the one that is most interesting to me is, does Tennessee get Tavion Gadsden here, the defensive lineman? To me, that's a big one if they can get him to campus.
All right, we'll finish up here with Athron. Latest on Devin Hobbs and Jordan Matthews, defensive tackle and cornerback.
Hobbs, don't believe he's coming in this weekend. I still feel like Tennessee's is starting to get some momentum there. Would I call them the leader? No. But would I say that they are way more of a factor now than they were 2-3 weeks ago? Absolutely. The fact he decided to push off his commitment it's great news for Tennessee. And the more you have a chance to have dialogue with him and everything, the better. So again, I think they were dead in the water 3 weeks ago. I no longer call them dead in the water. They're swimming. And so we'll see how much they can continue to swim and if they can find their way out of the water. And then as for Jordan Matthews, Tennessee and Texas, I expect him to pull the trigger sometime between the first week of August and the third week of August. I think he's coming off the board before his high school season starts. It's Tennessee and Texas, and it is not done one way or the other, but I do feel like Tennessee has started to trend well there.
That was good. Before I just AP. Why no LSU? It just seems so weird.
LSU kind of botched it. They botched it early on. They tried to recover and then botched it again. Dad played there, but I haven't talked to both sides. I just don't. I'm not saying that you never say never in recruiting, but I think they'll have to really find a way to recover big time if they're going to get back in there with him. I don't think this is something that they use. You remember how it felt with Randall Cobb. Was appreciative, but didn't just. It's kind of similar here. Like, I'm not saying that he won't come take a visit or give him a look, but it just doesn't feel that way to me at all. And I think that if they felt that way, if they felt like LSU stood a chance of trying to climb back in it, they probably would not be trying to pull the trigger sometime over the next 3 weeks.
We'll go to Sam Smith, 22-33. Brent Hubbs, which Jimmy makes a bigger impact this year, Holiday or Callaway? And I don't know how you'll answer, but I mean, until Jimmy Callaway does something, I'm going to say Holiday because I think he's going to return kicks.
I'm going to say Jimmy Holiday, and that's not. I'm not trying to slight Jimmy Callaway, but I think Holiday has shown me that he's feels a little bit more competitive. Willing to do some things. We've seen him make a couple of plays offensively, and certainly seen him do some things in the return game. I think Jimmy Holiday has showed a bit of a skill set that Callaway has not. And the question is, who does Callaway beat out at the receiver spot to get into that rotation there? Is he going to play the slot? Is he going to beat out Jalen Hyatt? Who else is going to be in that slot? What else are they going to look like there? I think this is a really big fall camp, really big preseason camp for Jimmy Callaway. Do I think it's should they have shut him out kind of the way they did after the Florida game? I don't know about that. I know he was playing prior to that, but I just think, when you look at where they are depth-wise right now and the competition they've got there, I just think he does not need to be in the ice tub, or the whirlpool. He needs to stay healthy, and he needs to be productive in this fall camp.
He's out of the two, he's actually, he's found the end zone. But the facts are that neither one of them has done very much in their time on campus. But as Eric pointed out, the ability to return kicks, he was the up man a year ago, shown some flashes when they didn't want to kick to Valus. I think he's going to be the guy that gets the call, definitely on kicks, maybe even on punts. But Jimmy Holiday is a little bit bigger than Jimmy Callaway. And I think that probably benefits him. I honestly, if Jimmy Callaway goes through fall camp, Hubs, and is a non-factor, I'd love to see them flip him to defense because I do think he can help them.
Yeah, he's a really good athlete. And this is kind of a sidebar here while we're kind of on the returners. And that's one of the positions that we need to kind of figure out as camp goes on is who's going to be returning kicks. But as much as we mentioned Jimmy Holiday, I think, D. Williams, he didn't play much of a factor at corner in spring. Didn't hear much buzz about him. I know everything was new to him, but he was a dynamic returner in junior college. And so I'm intrigued to see if he gets a look at returning kicks as well, along with Jimmy Holiday.
Did they actually do anything in spring, though? I mean, think about it. The orange and white game was whatever that was. And I mean, there was nobody in the secondary was healthy. So, I mean, I don't want to judge D. Williams right, wrong, or indifferent off anything they do in spring because I just didn't feel like I think they just kind of did a lot of individual work.
Well, yeah, and plus, too, I mean, it was brand new to him. I mean, it's hard to judge anybody off 10 practices and a couple of scrimmages, too, so.
Yeah, and I think, Rob, when you look at this team in the return game, you got two questions. One, do you have great competition because you got some great potential athletes there, or do you have a sack of potatoes, at that position? I don't think we know. I think there's good athletes, but you can be the best athlete in the world, but that's a skill set to return kicks, to feel it, to understand it. I mean, in that group that's going to get a look, who can really, who has that skill set, I think is intriguing to watch and is a big storyline for this team on special teams, because that's the only storyline on special teams. Everything else is settled. But there's some hidden yards there Tennessee took advantage of last year with Velus Jones. The question is, can they find those this year?
Oh, and I was going to, you stole my line that you kind of just poo-poo it or paper over it. Who's going to return kicks? Who cares? Just don't fumble it. Don't muff it. But you're right. I mean, Velus Jones was a weapon the past couple of years. I mean, really, delivered some huge plays in return game. And you talk about a skill set. We've been fortunate to see, two guys in the last 10 years in Velus Jones and Evan Berry, who, I mean, you see it. I mean, it's not about 40 time. It's not about, being elusive. I mean, there's just something about the vision and the feel for being able to do it. And it's a rare thing.
And then before that, you guys.
Think about the last three proven, real kick returners, not guys that they're just kind of throwing back there. You got Barry, you got Velus Jones, and you got the guy that nobody will kick to in the NFL, and Cordero Patterson, who just had a knack, who had a feel for it. So, you got two options. You can fair catch everything, and this was my frustration last year with Velus Jones. I thought he fair caught too much. I mean, I'm letting him bring it out. If his heels are at the goal line, he was bringing it out for me, because I thought his chances of getting past the 25 were worth the risk because of his skill set. Now, if you don't have a guy that you feel very comfortable with, look, man, you can put a guy back there and just fair catch it and play it at the 25. Same thing in the punt return game. So we'll see if anybody emerges there with great dynamics.
And wasn't it 2020 whenever Tennessee returned like 4 punts all year long? They fair caught literally everything. But when you have a guy back there to do it, then it makes all the difference in the world. This is for anybody. I'll start it off. Tennessee needs a 4th and 1 stop. Which two defensive tackles do they send out on the field? 4th and 1, I would say Amari Thomas and Elijah Simmons.
I'm going to go Amari Thomas and Dejon Terry.
I think I agree with Hubbard, but it would be great for Tennessee if Elijah Simmons was the other guy they sent out there, if he plays himself to that position.
I think a lot of those guys are kind of similar and interchangeable, so I don't think there's a wrong answer of anybody that said an answer.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Last one, Rob, if Cal did not take over the Edwards recruitment, is Edwards a Vol?
Yeah, I don't really know that this – I don't know that it was necessarily Cal taking it over necessarily. I think Kentucky really just came – besides Cal, just a full court press with the whole staff. And I think one of the big things back, from the start was that he just felt like more of a priority for Tennessee. I believe when he made his official visit to Kentucky way back last November, he came on a weekend when they had a home basketball game. And my impression in talking to him and some other people was that he felt like he was on the periphery, like he wasn't really a focus. It was more about, all about getting ready for the game and the current team. And he was just kind of on the outside looking in, as opposed, he also came to Tennessee on a game weekend during conference play. And I think he and his family felt much more included, much more prioritized. And I just think Kentucky overcame that over time. I mean, when you lose a kid to Kentucky in basketball recruiting, it's not an upset.
Yeah. Here's from Volunteer to 87. We're moving Nico from the conversation. You're an OC. What's your top 3 big board look like at that position? Nelson, Moore, and of course Arch Manning.
I would go Dante Moore. Then I would go Malachi Nelson, and then I'd go Arch Manning. I think this class is so deep. There's no, much like we said a minute ago, there's no wrong answers. I mean, you legitimately could take, Bama's got what, the 9th and 10th ranked quarterbacks in the country. And both those dudes in another year would be top 5. I mean, they would be right there, top 3 to 5, in my opinion. So this is just such a deep class. I mean, it's such a deep. I wonder what we look like when we look back 3 to 4 years from now. How many of those guys are entering the NFL draft or are returning for another year and are household names? I think when you look back, they're going to write about this class.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a really good class. I mean, I think I've said this. I think Arch is probably mentally further along than the rest of those guys. Now, maybe that's a bad assumption, but I think that he's got some mental development that's probably a little bit ahead of those guys, making him a little bit more ready
Right
now
away.
to play. But in terms of upside, I mean that's a sack of potatoes of really talented guys.
That's
Rob
two
Lewis.
in this podcast.
That's not a bad sack of potatoes. That's a good bag of bacon potatoes right there. Because I'm with Austin. I mean, I think when you look at this group, a year ago the quarterback class was okay. I think this has cycled up into being a really good class, and we've seen other years where you've had Austin, two guys kind of duking it out to be the number one guy. But legitimately, you got five guys here, 4 or 5 guys in this class that if they stay healthy, I think they've got a chance. It's got a chance to be one of the deepest quarterback classes we've seen.
Well, I think that when we look back, I'm going to fast forward us 30 years. When we look back 20 to 30 years from now, they could do a 30 for 30 on this class and how they translated to the NFL. And they're talking about, how we all competed against each other. Then we went to college and competed against each other. Now we're in the NFL, competed against each other. And we've been duking it out, the 4, 5, 6 of us, maybe even more than that, for a long time.
And part of the reason why this class is this way too is you're coming out of the cycle where you didn't get to go through 7-on-7s and you didn't get to see guys, because of the COVID stuff. So there's a lot more hype around these guys just because you went from seeing them as a freshman basically or heading into their sophomore year to their senior year. There's a big jump in development there and a big jump in growth there. So I think this class got a chance to be pretty dynamic, pretty special at the quarterback position.
Everybody listening right now is shouting and saying, well, where would you have Nico? Austin, of the 4 right now, where would you place Nico?
Oh, I'd put him number 1.
All right.
I think he and Dante Moore have the most upside of any of the quarterbacks. I think Nelson and Manning are the 2 most polished guys in the class. So like right now, if you're just saying just right now, I would say Nelson, Manning are the most polished, but that's not how this is done. From a ranking standpoint or from any projection standpoint, you're projecting who's going to be.
Yeah.
And so I would take Nico and Dante Moore.
One more from Volunteer at 87. Rob, the current renovations taking place at Thompson Bowling Arena, what's the plan for TBA? And Brent, you know this as well, kind of moving forward.
I mean, Hubbard, they're not tearing anything down right now.
Or at least what Danny White, I guess, maybe wants to do in the future.
I mean, I know what Rick Barnes would like to do is put not necessarily a concourse, but and again, I this is him spitballing. I don't think anything like this is in the works or planned for, but to have some kind of like some open air, like a seating area inside the arena that had like tables and maybe some vending stuff that would be probably behind the baskets on either end. We wouldn't really call it a concourse. But,
carnival, you got a carnival with candy apples,
bobbing for apples, a dunk pit, a dunk tank for AP. But I don't think anything huge is going on in there unless if it is, I'm just blindsided. I mean, they did a big locker room renovation within the past couple of years. That place is a showpiece downstairs.
I think there's 2 things with Danny. One, the area where the coaches' offices are now, which is a street level entrance into Thompson Bowling Arena. There's been some talk there about turning that into a premium area, not seating there, but you would do premium food and kind of a club level there that would come out into that basic bottom bowl level at Thompson Bowling Arena.
It's for people that enter the arena, like if you park in G10 and in the arena through that gate underneath, you saw this year behind the black curtains, they set up something like that where they had they cordoned off an area. They had high top tables and a bunch of TVs and wait staff and a bar and heavy hors d'oeuvres. I think that Danny White would like to move that up to the area where Hubbard's talking about, and Rick Barnes would be totally fine with moving the coaches' offices into Pratt Pavilion, which is where he spends 90% of his time anyway.
Yeah, I know Danny White feels like the corners in Thompson Bowling Arena are some wasted space that could be better used. And one of the things to better using that is for premium areas, you know, because that's how you pay for a lot of things. I think season ticket sales in basketball are going to be really interesting to take a look at this fall, to see where that's at, because so many of those season ticket sales in basketball for years have been tied to your football donation, and obviously that's not the case with the restructuring. So what does that season ticket number look like? Because to get a basketball season ticket, you're going to make a donation strictly to basketball, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm giving, you know, whatever 5-figure donation is for football, and I want my 2 basketball tickets and parking pass with it. That's a big structure change there. That will be something to keep an eye on in terms of how many basketball season tickets are sold.
And Hubbard, I don't know about you, but in talking, I mean, I know you know a ton of people, talk to a ton of people, old school veteran fans that I have talked to this summer. They're a little more miffed at the basketball increases in donations and the way the tickets have been tweaked than they were in football. I don't know if that's just, you know, people that I've spoken to, but that's seems to be the majority.
Well, and so many of those guys feel like that, you know, they were, you know, grandfathered into that, and again, they were getting basketball tickets with their football donation, and now there's separation there. And you know, that Tennessee's left a lot of money on the table for a long time because of that, particularly when they've been good in basketball. There were some years where they weren't good in basketball; they weren't going to make any money doing it that way. But where they've been the last, you know, few years, and certainly in the Pearl era, if those had been donations for those basketball season tickets, they would have generated more revenue, and that's something that obviously Danny White's talked about in early July when he released their 5-year model and their 5-year plan.
All right, here's a really good question from Coach_93. Austin, what's the benefit of taking an official in the summer over an official in the fall? One would think recruits would want to be on hand for a game day environment for their official visit.
Coaches would much rather them come in the summer or in December. Spend more time with the kids. Kids aren't sliding in here sideways after they play on Friday nights. I mean, if you think about it, like, let's say Nico want to take his official visit, plays on Friday night, takes a red eye, lands in Knoxville, is dog tired. Then you're expecting him to like have, you know, energy all day to make it through a 3:30 or 7 o'clock game. Then Sunday you spend time with him and you put him right back on an airplane because they got to be back, you know, in town for school and practice on Monday. Like, you want to maximize your time. And that's why most coaches prefer official visits either in the summer, which again, a few years ago, coaches were like, I don't want to do these summer visits. And now they're like, this is better than the football season. The goal of most coaches is to get kids to campus unofficially during the football season. That way you don't have to use your official. So, because you want to maximize time. That's the biggest thing.
Well, and it's become the trend to come off the board before August gets here.
Yes.
If you wait and bring a guy in for an official visit in September, you may never see him because he's committed elsewhere, you know, in the month of July or August. I mean, kids, for whatever reason, and I don't know, Rob, why this shift is taking place. Maybe it's just because it's the early signing day, but I mean, the trend is get it done and be done before you ever step foot on your high school field for your senior season, and not have to deal with it in December. And that's why you got to. I mean, that's why you got to bring them in if you're schools, because if you don't, you're not going to get a chance to recruit them.
Yeah, and I think it's also part of it is the recruiting process starts so much earlier.
Yeah,
for these kids too. I mean, it's not like they're making hasty rush decisions. I mean, they've been anybody that is good enough to play at this level and commit to, you know, SEC school has been taking unofficial visits probably since after his freshman year.
I mean, T-Lander's been here 6 times.
Yeah, which was just a different animal from what it was even 10 years ago.
Yeah, very much so. Good point.
Rob, let's stay with you. Are the Vols involved with 2024 Curtis Gibbons Jr.? He has a close relationship with Kennedy Chandler.
It's, involved. I don't know how involved. I mean, it's a guy that they're looking at. Not somebody that I would put as a top shelf target right now. But I mean, I guess you could throw him on the board. But man, they're involved with most of the 2024 guards, and not most of them, it's too early because this could change drastically, but a lot of kids in the Carolinas because of Justin Gainey's ties over there. A lot of good players, a few who we wrote about in the last few weeks after being over to Rock Hill. But that 2024 board, any board 2 years out in basketball, is pretty fluid.
This is a really good question. I saw this prior to recording the podcast. When we go around the room. Deshaun 13, rank the defensive units from top to bottom: defensive line, linebackers, corners, and then safeties. I'm grouping obviously the edge and the defensive line. I would go 1 defensive line, 2 safeties, just because you know what you got there. 3 probably linebackers, then 4 corners. And I understand you've got a lot of options at corner now, but that's a good question. But I would go linebackers, I would go defensive line, safeties, linebackers, then corner. How would you go, Brent?
Well, if you're putting the edge guys on the defensive line, then I'm going to say defensive line. Obviously, they're replacing Matthew Butler in the middle, but I would go defensive line as well. After that, if they, I don't think they're great at linebacker. I mean, I know what you got at safety, but those guys just have to play better. I mean, they've got to play better than they did a year ago. I might go linebackers over the safeties, and for me, corners last, because I just don't know who's going to play it. I mean, I think Kamal Haddon can be a solid corner. I have no idea who's going to play the other. Warren Burrell did not play very well at the end of last year. He's going to have to step up his game. Outside of that, who are the corners on this roster?
Is Turnage a corner?
Is Turnage a corner? Is Christian Charles a corner? What do they get out of Williams? There's so many questions at corner and so many unknowns. They could be rail thin there, or they could have some depth there. Just depends on where they decide where to put people, and that changes the outlook at corner a bit as well. But right now, that would be kind of how I would rank them.
What you got, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I would EC, that I would definitely put the defensive line and the edge guys number 1, just because you got some experience there. You've got some pretty tantalizing talent in Byron Young. I guess I'll go linebackers. I guess I'll probably follow Hubbard's lead. I would definitely put corners last, simply because you don't have a clue about what you've got. And in linebacker at safety, Hubbard, can I say sack of potatoes? Have you copyrighted that?
Nope. You can get your third reference in. You can get the third reference in.
At both spots, linebacker, inside linebacker, safety, you got guys who have played a lot of football, and I guess maybe you can argue that Jeremy Banks is, maybe an upper tier guy there, but you just don't have a lot of playmakers, difference makers in the middle of the defense, in my opinion.
All right, Austin Price. We'll move on. Wide receiver recruiting. An update on Devin Hyatt, Aiden Williams, and Traylon Ray.
I don't think there's not a whole lot going on with any of them. I think Traylon Ray may take a visit in season. Aiden Williams says he's going to, and then I've not heard anything on Devin Hyatt.
We'll move on to Sheeran. What do you expect from Julian Phillips this year, Rob? What are the reports on him this summer?
Really good player. He's going to make an impact. He's going to play a lot of minutes. I don't know if he'll start out of the gate, but he's going to play 20-plus minutes a game. But, Tennessee fans should be used to seeing 5-star freshmen come in here, and they're just not – unless you're, Paolo Banchero or Jabari Smith, you're not going to dominate. You're going to be a really good player. You're going to be a piece of the puzzle. I would say Julian is probably a little more polished than Keon coming in, and since he doesn't play on the ball, since he doesn't have the ball in his hands all the time, I don't know that he's going to make the impact that Kennedy did last year. But he's a dynamic athlete. He can do a lot of things. Coaches like his work ethic. He's going to play a bunch. He's going to be a big piece of the puzzle. He's going to be an impact player. Not going to be a superstar in year 1, in my opinion.
All right, we'll go to iHeart Balls. Now that the NCAA has spoken, what is your opinion of how Fulmer's departure was handled compared to your opinion the day of the press conference, Brent?
Well, my whole thing with the Fulmer departure was they'd hired a search firm before he officially resigned. So I mean, it's calling it a resignation or a retirement, and I think Coach Fulmer had a little bit of maybe second thoughts after saying, "Hey, let's go ahead and make a move. I'm going to step down," and maybe decided he didn't want to step down, and I think that's why there was that was a little bit of awkwardness at that press conference. I will say this: Philip Fulmer's name is not anywhere listed in the notice of allegations. It doesn't show up in there at all. So. Obviously there was a little bit of a timing. It sounded like there was some timing issues on when he decided to depart and when Tennessee decided to go looking for an AD.
Another part of this question, assuming all of the 4- and 5-star players who left after Pruitt's left the program were involved with the violations, were they encouraged by the administration to find new schools, or was there a genuine effort to keep any of them?
All those guys were going to have to make restitution if they were going to stay. If somebody was on this team last year who was involved in taking something, they were going to have to make restitution to be on the field for Tennessee. Now, some of those guys who left, who spoke to the NCAA, Austin got immunity, and got, admonished or whatever. But if you were going to stay, and some did, those guys had to make restitution for whatever financial violation what was created. Otherwise, Tennessee would have been playing an ineligible athlete.
That's correct. So, I mean, most of those guys could have stayed had they wanted to. As Hub said, they would have had to, paid restitution, but they chose to leave on their own. They were not encouraged to leave. Most of them, made the decision on their own or were encouraged by no one at Tennessee, but by others to get out of town.
All right, we'll get to a few more here. We'll go to Vol Apps. Talk to us about Brandon Turnage. He seemed to be the most athletic defensive back that Tennessee had, was forced to start one game, and he was a defensive player of the week. What's holding him off the field, Brent Hubbs?
Theo Jackson did last year.
Yeah.
I mean, Turnage hadn't worked at corner. He was the nickel guy, and he wasn't going to play ahead of Theo Jackson. Theo Jackson erased so many mistakes and cleaned up so many messes back there. That's why Brandon Turnage didn't get on the field, because they were going to keep Theo Jackson on the field because of everything he did for Tennessee. Now the question is, can Turnage play? Is he the nickel this fall? Is that going to be Turrentine? The transfer from Georgia Tech? Does Turnage work at corner? That goes back to the previous question that they're asking about ranking guys. You just don't know who's going to play corner for this team. That's going to be, because none of them went through spring. They didn't sort any of that stuff out. So we'll see what that looks like here 10 days into fall camp.
E_Schaefer92, with Mohan missing so much time, he missed all of spring. Do you think Herring has a better chance of seeing the field in a reserve role, Austin Price?
We'll see. I mean, I think a lot of that determines on fall camp. I don't want to get too far out there without seeing it. I mean, we just saw so little in the spring, and so when you look at like the depth of the position, we'll see.
All right, and then finally, another question about the 2023 recruits who are going to be here on this weekend. Austin, real quick, just give us a rundown. What's this weekend look like on Saturday night for this barbecue? Remember, Jack Luttrell committed at this thing this time last year.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think go back to the list we had in the war room. Not all those guys are going to make it in. The biggest thing to me is I don't believe Hobbs is going to make it in, but you never know. I do not believe Stanton Ramil is going to make it in, but I don't think that has any bearing on his decision. Does a guy like Tavion Gadsden make it in? That's to me as important a player as anybody, just because you need help on the D line. He's a guy you're recruiting and have a shot at. So, to me, that's where Tennessee's got to get better. You look at the next three that potentially come off the board one way or the other, whether it's to Tennessee or not, are 2 corners and an offensive lineman. After that, I think the attention's got to turn to the interior part of the defensive line, and that's why, somebody like Gadsden is important.
I know, Austin, we're about out of time here, and this is not a mailbag question, but I'm going to ask anyway. So this is Brent_Hubbs with a logged mailbag question here for the podcast. Is this a bigger weekend for Tennessee recruiting wise because of guys going elsewhere than it
Yes.
is necessarily guys coming to town. When you talk about Ricky Gibson and you talk about Jordan Matthews and those types of things, is the recruiting storyline more about what those guys do on the other visits than it is necessarily who's coming to town this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, Ricky Gibson going to be at Georgia coming up Saturday, and then Jordan Matthews is supposed to be at Texas today, and so he has not taken an official visit to Texas, but I still think he's coming off the board sometime in the next week and a half to 3 weeks.
I was going to say, I skipped over this question by accident, but someone wants to know, can Texas seal that thing right now? I mean, could he come out in the next couple of days and commit to Texas, or would it be
No,
they can move the needle and he'll still, in a couple of weeks, make his call or whatever?
yeah, I think that's what you're looking at. If Texas, I don't see him committing in the next 2 to 3 days. No.
Okay. Plenty of stuff to get into. We got a massive recruiting weekend coming up for those on campus. And of course, like they just mentioned, those out of campus will we talk to some kids, get up stories on Volquest.com. Fall camp, it begins on Sunday with Media Day. So there's no better time to subscribe to the Volquest YouTube channel right now. Every time a video is posted, you will be notified. A big thank you to Smoky Mountain Organics. You can shop online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com or visit one of the 3 locations in East Tennessee, 8018 Kingston Pike. That's the one right here in Knoxville. For Rob Lewis, Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, I'm Eric Kane. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here today and submitting your questions for the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. Have a good rest of your Thursday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest Mailbag Podcast every week right here on Volquest.